Hello again, this is Rainman Trail for PokerStrategy.com, and today I'm going to be doing a video that I think is going to be quite a bit of fun. It's going to be fun for me, and hopefully it'll be fun for you guys as well. This is the very first horse tournament I ever played. It was a Sunday night horse on Full Tilt. When they kind of first started doing it, they had about 100 players. Well, I'm not sure if it was when they first started, but it was a couple years back. Anyhow, it was the first horse tournament I ever played, and subsequently I actually won. So it's going to be fun to watch as we progress through, and I actually won the following week as well. They have it every Sunday night. It's the big tournament on Full Tilt, the Sunday Night Horse, this $200 buy-in. So I won it back-to-back weeks. In fact, the first two times I'd played it. And then I was really excited. I'd gone home and played in a local live casino horse tournament and won that as well. So I had quite the streak when I first started playing horse. So I hope you guys enjoy this. I'm going to have fun going through it. And obviously I ran well. I mean, anytime you win a tournament, I think you have to admit that cards came your way. Because if they don't, as a general rule of thumb, you're not going to be winning the tournament. So there's going to be some things in here where we're running well. And then another thing I want to kind of point out as well is I'm going to be probably somewhat critical of my play because this is where I was at a couple years ago, and I'm certainly going to be making mistakes in this video. I would be making mistakes today. Everyone makes mistakes, so I'll be critical of those. But I also want to point out some of the good things that I did well in this tournament. So I hope you guys enjoy as I take you through the journey of my first horse video. My first horse tournament. So this is, as we start off, we're starting off in the Hold'em round, of course, and we get Deuce 5 suited. And it gets raised, and we're not going to play that. And so we move on to the next hand. I've got 8-9 offsuit, which I fold under the gun. The third hand, we get King-Queen in the big blind, which is certainly a good hand to see in the big blind, and we'll go ahead and call. We call. It gets raised from mid-position by Calit 91. The flop comes out with an ace and a king. I check, of course. The pre-flop raiser checks behind on this flop, which is generally it means one of two things. Like it usually means he has like pocket queens, or he has like a set of aces, or ace king. He either has a monster hand or he just hates that flop. So you usually won't see someone like checking behind here with ace queen. That just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And so the last player actually bets, which I just opt to fold because he did call a raise cold from the cutoff position, and so I do think he has at least we give him the respect of having a strong enough hand, and then to bet into us both on this flop after we've checked, I'll just give him credit right now and say he's got the ace until he proves me otherwise. The other guy isn't quite believing it though. He calls him down. He checks, bets again, and we see a call. So we see a check and another check. So I was right in the read with Calit. It's usually, I said pocket queens, and here, as we can see, is pocket jacks. So now the other player betting an 8 there, I really don't like that at all. Obviously, I mean, I don't mind his call pre-flop. I mean, that's a 8-9 suited. I like those kind of hands. But for him to be betting through there and then checking behind him, he has a hand. He has a hand if nobody else does. I mean, the pot's his. He doesn't have to bluff, right? And so, but it worked against us, and we folded a king. So maybe he thought we both had a king and would maybe lay it down. But with the other guy behind us, I can't really call there. So anyways, I still like the fold, even though we obviously folded the best hand. I still like the fold in this as played, and Calit 91 goes ahead and plays a bit of sheriff there, and we'll take the pot. And that's a good thing worth noting. When you're playing in a tournament, you certainly want to know who's capable of those kind of bluffs and plays. So you're going to want to be taking note of that as you go through. So that last hand, we're folding it out of the small blind. Of course, we're going to be folding the 6 deuce here. The king 6, there's no reason to get involved here. And the queen 3, same thing, no reason to get involved. Jack 6 suited, again, no reason to get involved. And then now we do have a reason, of course, to get involved, pocket queens. And of course, we are going to raise here. and we get a couple callers and just a monster flop. Queen 6-4 rainbow. I just bet for value. There's some value in checking behind when you have such a monster hand, but as a general rule of thumb, players don't always believe you on a board that's this dry. So I would definitely just go ahead and bet my hand for value. I get check raise, which is great. I just flat call the raise so that I can get value on the turn. So he bets into me, and now I make the raise on the turn. So I get a little bit more action, or I get a little bit more chips in the pot this way. Overall, as a general rule of thumb. Now he comes back over the top again and re-raises. That's just disastrous. I mean, he could have quad fours, I suppose, but he probably has sixes full, and if not, he may just have been trying to make a move. But we're going to cap. I mean, we have pretty much the nuts, and he folds. So he was just making a play. Again, probably worth knowing, but he's got to know that he's beat. So the next hand we get Queen Jack under the gun, and I fold that, which I like. I don't really like playing Queen Jack offsuit under the gun on a full table. It's just not strong enough, so I fold that. And then that's it for the hold'em round. So then we find ourselves in the big blind in the Omaha high-low round. So this first hand of Omaha high-low, we've got two limpers, no raisers so far pre-flop, and the button calls and the small blind calls. So everybody just limps. And it's five-way action, and I check. There's no reason to raise this hand pre-flop. We flop a pair of sixes with a second nut low. Now remember, no one raised pre-flop, so it is possible that we have the best low hand. I wouldn't say it's probable or likely, but with everyone calling, there's no raise pre-flop. There's 5 players in the pot, and so we're getting pretty compelling odds to see a turn card, which I opt to do. Turn gives us a straight draw, kind of, sorta. 5 would give us a sucker straight, and of course there's 3 clubs out there. So we don't want to put any strength value. We don't really want to put any merit on, of course, that sucker straight. I'm just pointing it out that it is out there. But really the main reason we're in this hand is because of the ace-3 low. And at this point, because there's a straight on the board and a flush on the board, and we don't have nut low, I like folding the turn here. And I don't know if I did it in the video. I actually make a play at the pot. That's kind of interesting, which is actually, in my opinion, better than a call here, because I can maybe chase off other hands, but I prefer a fold. I don't really know exactly why I'm doing this, but and then he gets re-raised, and of course I know I'm dead meat now. But this is definitely someone overplaying their bad low, which is what I'm doing here, and this is just disastrous. At this point, I'm not chasing anybody out. There's still 4-way action here. I should expect that someone has the ace deuce and just fold this hand. So this is me playing poorly, and again I just call. I mean, this is just terrible. I can't even believe I'm watching myself do this. And it actually turns out that I was good. I had the low, so maybe it's not as bad as I thought. But I don't know if. And the tough thing is, I don't like reviewing now. This is a couple years back. It's possible I had some kind of timing tell, which I do take from time to time, and I go with them when I get them. And as you've seen throughout my previous videos, when I do misplay a hand, seemingly, I usually have a read and it works out. I can't quite necessarily claim that on that particular hand, but it's possible, because it's pretty bad for me to be calling in there with that ace-3. So from my standpoint, that was poorly played today. If you have some kind of read and you think, oh, I know my ace-3 is good, then sure, whatever. But I still don't like it. So we move on to the next hand, and I get a couple wheel cards and 9s double suited on the button, which is actually kind of like a steal-worthy hand if it gets folded to us, but this isn't a good hand at all. Not when other people have voluntarily entered the pot, so we just fold it. And of course, same thing with this 7, 9, 7, 10. You might see this hand and think, pair of 7s, 9, 10 suited, 7, 9, 10 is some good straight combo. These are not the type of hands. Again, I've said this throughout my previous videos. these are the type of hands that are like trap hands in Omaha high-low. Now, if you're playing PLO, just pot limit Omaha high, these kind of hands are considerably better because you can make like the nut high with 9-10. But you can't make the nut high in this, or you can't make the nuts in this game, because if I make let's say I make a straight with my 9-10, well, that means there's a 6-7-8 on board, right? And so if there's a 6-7-8 on board, then there's a low on board. So half the pot's going to somebody else. And now, of course, I could, it could be like, like 7-8 and Jack or something would give us a straight as well. But the point is that when we make a hand with this, it usually is involving us giving the other half the pot away, and that's not what we want to do. So don't play these kind of hands. And I don't want to spend too much time reviewing that. If you're really at that basic of a level, that's okay. But I'm gonna redirect you to some of my previous videos on Omaha high-low to really get you more familiar with the starting hand requirements of this game, because you have got to be extremely tight to show a profit in this game. King Jack 3-5, not worth our time. Again, 10 Jack 4-6, no good. And now we move on to the Raz round. So here we get Deuce 4-4. And I would imagine that this is probably going to be the game I critique myself with the most in this video is Raz, because this was early on in my Raz career, and I've played probably a million hands of Raz since this video. And so I've got a lot more experience, and I've done a lot more in-depth mathematical analysis of Raz after this video. So I'm definitely going to be critical of my mistakes in Raz in this game. But that's okay. That's how we learn, right? So here's the next hand in Raz. No need to talk about that. With a queen in the door. Ace, deuce, jack, again, nothing worthy there. Jack in the door, no good. And here we have steal potential hand. If this gets folded to us, I would steal with it. It doesn't, so we'll fold it and move on to the next hand. Same thing here. We've got a steal worthy hand if it gets folded to us, but it does not, so we fold. And of course, jack in the door, no good. And now we finally get a Raz hand. And there is only one other low hand out there, and he's raised every time, just about, in Raz. So this is an easy 3-bet for us, which I do. And he calls. So we're just going to go ahead and bet our hand for value. And he bets into us here. I actually think that we're ahead of his range. I think we have a 7 draw, and he has an 8 draw. But in case I'm wrong, not a whole lot of value in raising there, because even if I'm correct, I'm only slightly ahead. Next card comes, he catches an ace. I still think we're obviously drawing good, or not drawing dead, and we pair up on the end, so no value in our hand here, and it's an easy fold. So next we get king in the door, no good. Actually, pocket kings, pair of kings rather. Next hand we get a king in the door again, no good. Queen in the door. So as you can see, we're not running well at Raz so far. 10 in the door, 9 in the door. This is callable if one of these guys raises. And I actually folded. I must have had it on auto fold though. I mean, obviously against a 9 limper, just heads up, this is an easy call. So, and not even anything wrong with raising to make sure the king gets out of the hand. But I must have had it on auto fold. Because otherwise that would be silly. So here we have a 9 in the door again, but this should have no attention because there are 4 low cards left to act behind me. Although actually this is stud high now, so this is the first hand of stud high. I just realized the deuce has the bring in, so still no value in either game. So here we have an ace jack down with a 4 in the door, ace behind us. There's no value in this hand. Easy fold. And same thing with this queen deuce 4. So as you can see early on here, we're not really getting anything to play. We got split 2s, or there's a dead 2 out there. Easy fold. Here we have a little bit of steal potential if it gets folded to us with this king in the door, which it doesn't. It gets folded to the other king, and he raises. So finally here we get a little bit of a hand. We have the highest door card being a jack, We also have an ace down, and we have 3 spades. Now there's 2 spades. There are 2 dead spades out there, but one of the really good things for us is that there are no dead aces, nines, or jacks. So this is a very live hand. We don't have to catch spades to win this. We can just catch one of our pairs, likely. And we have the strength of our door card, just winning unimproved. So this is a very strong hand. In fact, it's one I would re-raise if one of these guys had raised. But apparently I wasn't paying attention, or something had it on autofold or something. I'm not sure. You know, actually, I think I think I had connection, if I recall correctly, I had connectivity issues at the beginning of this tournament as well. This hand history file was emailed to me by Full Tilt Poker. So all of these hands, I wasn't necessarily sitting at them. This wasn't my computer's hand history file. This was their database's hand history file. So they were kind enough to provide that to me. So I do recall, I think that's what was happening here. Because obviously that's a monster hand, and I would, of course, would be raising it. So we'll move on. In fact, so it looks like, well, I have connectivity here, obviously. So here we have the king raising. Now this is the same guy who's raised literally almost every time. If you've been watching in this video so far, he has been raising like crazy. So that's certainly why I'm re-raising him here. This is a pretty poor re-raise play as a general rule of thumb, but I was just so sure that this guy had nothing that I didn't really care. So I raised him. And he just calls, which I like to see, of course. The other guy catches a king, which we like to see. That's that many fewer kings in the deck for Omnix to have. And I'm just going to go ahead and bet it for value. And I anticipate that if he had the kings here, he'd be jamming right back. So here we catch a spade. That actually looks pretty strong against our opponents. So I opt to check it. And I'm not sure if I was thinking, oh, I'll try and slow play these guys, or if I thought at this point, okay, there's no way they're going to believe I have a flush and fold, and was just kind of hoping my jacks were good at this point. So there's a lot that could be going on there. I kind of like betting there, because that's a spot where some players will actually even fold a king. If you re-raise Third Street and they were representing a pair of kings, and you 3-bet them, that you're saying I can beat kings, or if not, they could at least think I have a flush, and if not a flush made, certainly a flush draw. So they could be afraid of a lot of things, and I think that's a reason that you need to be betting that hand on Fifth Street. Even though I do kind of understand the concept of not wanting to. That's what I did. So here I make jacks up, which is kind of an interesting hand against this Visa Gold guy, because Visa Gold just called on Third Street with his 3 in the door versus the king, and he kind of kept on calling all the way through, and now all of a sudden he's betting on 6th Street when he catches a 5, which is kind of weird. And I catch another 3, so I have a pair of 3s, and that tells me he probably didn't start with a pair of 3s. So it really is kind of suspect what he could be holding here. I mean, I've got one of his 6s, he's got one of his 5s, he's got one of his kings, and I've got 2 of his 3s. So I don't really know what he's got. This is kind of a tough spot, and at this point, I would just call him down. So Omnix decides to just come out betting now, and he's raising. I don't think he's snowing here. I don't think he's just totally bluffing. This is a really tough spot, and I think I can safely fold jacks and 3s here, even though the pot is fairly big. Which I don't. I opt to call. And he has a straight, which is kind of interesting. I'm not sure what he started with there. If he started with the 2-3-4 and then barreled through 2-3-4 and then a king and calls it, I don't know. That's kind of close. So nonetheless, I should have expected that jacks and 3s were not good. And the other guy makes a straight as well. Wow. And that's incredible. And so both players win straights, and we lose. Oh, I apologize. This entire hand was stud high low. This was the first hand of stud high low split. So that makes a whole lot more sense as to why this guy was raising, and why he was in there with 2-3-4 to start with, or maybe 3-4-5. At which point, now I can understand certainly why I'd be calling, because I would have assumed that he's just raising with the low. Of course he would be. So that makes a whole lot more sense. So my jacks and threes, that's not a bad call, given that it's a split pot game. But I certainly would not have anticipated Omnix to have a king high straight in stud high low, and with the way this hand progressed, that's kind of a strange hand. But that's okay. Being as it was stud high low, that's fine. So here we have 7-6-3 as the bring in. There's a couple dead aces, a dead 7, and we'll certainly call this hand. We pair our 7 on 4th street, but the good thing for us is that that's a really good door card for us to be having. We have 2 lows, 2 straight flush lows in fact, and so it's a good scare card for us to have on that board. And they just bet into us. Now I catch kind of a brick here on 5th street. I do have just a pair of 7s, and it's possible I'm up against a high hand. This is kind of a tough spot. I opted to barrel through it. I pick up a flush draw on 6th street now, and now we're of course attached to the hand. We can't fold it now. And we just hope to catch on 7th, which we don't. And he checks, and he checks. So I actually like that. Obviously, I don't think my 7s are any good here. This is a bluff. And the tough thing is, bluffing in stud high low is generally not a good idea, because they don't know which you're going for, high or low. So you'll often get called, especially up against 2 players. You're going to get called. There's no value in bluffing on 7th street in a 3-way pot in stud high low game, especially the way this hand went down. So I don't like that bluff there, not even a little bit. It gets raised, which I'm hoping he just is raising with low, which actually drives out the other player. And it works out great, because my bet allows the low hand to raise, and drives out what was probably a better high hand, and I'll take the high with a pair of 7s. So that actually works out quite well for us. And so here we have split 8s, which is no value here in stud high low. And here we have 3 to a flush with no dead spades. There's a dead king and a dead 6, no dead jacks. The board, or the hand, has been completed and re-raised, and I don't like calling there with just a flush draw in a split pot game for 2 bets. That's not good. So here we have deuce 6-3, and obviously this is a strong hand, and it gets open completed. The guy with the deuce of diamonds open completes it, and then the 10 raises. I just call the raise with a 3-6 deuce. And it gets re-raised. It looks like this player is probably trying to get all in. He's only got 175 chips behind. There's 240 out in the pot. And I just call. But at this point, unfortunately, the tough thing about building these monster pots on 3rd street is, then you're attached to the hand on 4th street. You can't really get away. I mean, even if this guy raises, I've got a call to get this guy all in. So it gets difficult. And this is just the worst. This guy's catching perfect cards, 5 of diamonds, 4 of diamonds. Anytime you see a guy with like 3 straight flush wheel cards and stud high low, fear him. That's dirty. Fortunately for us, we have a 3. He's got 2 of the 3s, and we've got 2 of the 6s. So it's not like we're going to be shown like a straight 6 or something like that very often here, or almost ever. But so I opt to bet it. And it gets called from the all-in, and the other guy folds, which is about what I want to see. I get a heads up with the made low versus our pair of 6s. Now we make trip 6s, and he improves his low, and we'll just split this pot up. And that works out well. The King Jack 3, this is steal potential, but he folds, so we fold as well. And then we make it back to the hold'em round. So here we find ourselves in early position, 5-4 offsuit, which is no good. Next hand, 7-3 offsuit, doesn't need any commentary. And the next hand we have is an 8-9. Of course, we're in the big blind. It doesn't get folded, or it doesn't get raised, so we get to see a flop for free, and we flop the open ender. And I just opt to bet it. And the reason I'm betting here is because there was no pre-flop raiser. I don't really want to give a free card, and I'm really not I'm not too concerned about getting raised, because even if I do, I've got a strong hand. So this is kind of a semi-bluff hand. I'd like to just take it right now, but doesn't work out. The other guy was limping with a hand that looks like connected with that board, of course. He calls, so this is actually good. We like seeing this other guy call. It gives us a little bit better odds on our draw here. And unfortunately, that's not the card we want to see, because now if we catch our queen, then any ace beats us. So this is kind of no longer an open-ender. I mean, it's still an open-ender, of course. A 7 or a queen gives us a straight, but the queen, we shouldn't really anticipate, is going to win the hand for us. So they bet 200, and I wisely fold because of that. I'm just not quite getting the odds. I basically am now drawing to a 7. Is kind of how I'm viewing it. An ace, sure, I mean, it wins me the pot sometimes, but I just don't like our outs enough there, so I fold. And now the queen makes a straight, and they both have the straight, and they actually go ahead and win. And we'll split the pot, rather, I mean. So here we have ace king in the small blind. There's a limper under the gun and a raiser on the button. And this is actually a really solid player. In fact, I'm sandwiched in between two very strong players. For those of you who follow sort of the online leaderboards, Rocky Boy here on my left was leggy for a long time, one of the top online tournament players. GB 2005, I believe he's won a few F-top events, and I think he even has a World Series bracelet now. I think he won that like 2 years ago, if it's the same player I'm thinking of. But nonetheless, they're very strong players. And I don't know this at the time, I don't think, playing that. But as I'm looking back, I'm somewhat stunned. But nonetheless, so there's a limp under the gun, and I think this is the right play here, is to 3-bet it. You want to put a lot of pressure on him, especially being out of position. It's better to get this hand heads up and then play it post-flop with a little extra money in the pot. So we opt to 3-bet, and the limper folds, which is what we like to see, and the other player flat calls on the button. And we'll just go ahead and bet our hand for, I mean, mainly for value. If we get raised here, we'll call him down. I mean, he probably has, pocket tens or something if so, but we have a strong hand, and I would just keep betting it for value. And of course, gin comes on the turn for us. We make top pair and nut flush draw, and he just calls. And I'm just going to keep betting for value and hope to get paid off by another hand. And kind of well played by our opponent here to not raise the turn. Because of the fact that we 3-bet pre-flop, he's got to narrow our range quite a bit. And I think that's a brilliant play by him on a couple of accounts, because ace-king makes up a pretty big portion of a lot of people's 3-betting range, as well as aces, pocket kings, and then if you think some of the other hands would be pocket queens and pocket jacks. Well, there's only one of those hands I mentioned that he would be beating, is pocket queens, which is not a very likely one because he has a queen. So for him to just flat call there is phenomenal, I would say, and one of the reasons he's a top player. But notice he didn't fold it. Again, is wise. Here I have 9-10 on the button with just a limper under the gun. I don't mind limping here on the button with the way this hand is going, but I opted to fold it, which is fine as well. I mean, there's not a whole lot of money in the pot to fight for. And we would have flopped top pair, but that's okay. I try not to focus on shoulda, woulda, couldas. So here we have a king 3 in the cutoff. No value there. Queen 6 suited in the hijack. Not gonna steal with that. The 8-5, no good. And here we pick up ace jack suited. Of course, it's a very strong hand. We'll go ahead and raise that from early position. And we get called by both the blinds, and again flop gin. At this point, I could just flat call here and try and raise the turn, or I could try and raise now, squeeze out the other player if there's some kind of straight potential. The board is kind of middle card heavy in that there is a lot of straight combos. 7-9, 9-10, Queen 10 has a gutter. There's a lot of these type of middling hands that make straight draws, and I don't really want to give a king queen a free hand. So I opt to raise here now because it's three-handed, but I also like just calling here and then raising the turn. to try and gain maximum value out of the hand. Which is what I'll do now, of course. He bets into me, I'll raise the turn. We have basically the nuts. He's going to have a full house to beat us here. And he is drawing dead with a pair of sixes. And we'll take that pot. Next hand, 7-3 suited under the gun, no good. And then now we're moving on into Omaha high-low again. So here we pick up in the big blind, ace-3, 7-10 double suited, which is a moderately strong hand. Of course, the main part of the strength there is in the ace-3 suited. There's no razors pre-flop. I just let it go for free for the check. We flop a pair of sevens with not much else. And it goes check, check, bet, and I just fold. There's no value in me trying to chase a small pot here, or even trying to defend with something I don't have. Just a pair of sevens is no good. So next hand we have deuce 3, 6, 10 in the small blind. It gets raised, and that's just not strong enough to call. But I do call, so I don't like that. I think that should be a fold. Flop comes up pair of threes, and we have a 6 deuce for low, which is actually not bad. On these kind of boards, when the ace comes out, and like a 3 comes out, that's gonna nullify a lot of, or counterfeit a lot of these low hands that are played. So those, you no longer have to have the nuts on a board like this. If the flop is like 5, 7, 8, you pretty much want to have the ace deuce if you're going to continue, because you want that nut low hand if you're going to continue. But on a board like this, a lot of times you can pick up a pot, with deuce 5, deuce 6, 4, 5, stuff like that. You don't necessarily have to have that deuce 4 to win the pot on a board like this, because a lot of people who are getting deuce 4s are folding them unless they're accompanied with an ace, right? So this hand is a little bit stronger because of that. We goes check, check, and just bet on the button. Especially since it was a raise hand preflop, I will call, and I like that. Perfect card on the turn for us. A 4 comes in, makes our hand a little bit better. Now he has to have a deuce 5 for a low and a wheel in order to beat us for the low hand. So I bet into him. I don't like that, but actually it's not too bad. This could get because this is really telling him, hey, I have a wheel. That's a pretty scary bet into him. So I think this is actually kind of a good bet in retrospect, especially because of who it is. He may just have something like a pair of aces, not have anything, and a good player might be able to lay down, aces up here, aces and sevens or something, thinking they're drawing, to only a couple cards in the deck. So it just depends on who your opponent is. With this guy being so wild, as we've seen throughout the tournament so far, I'm not sure that he's the right player to make this play against, but I do like this play as a general poker concept. So I bet into him here, and he folds, and that's perfect. So I basically turned what was probably half the pot, low, 6 deuce for low, and won the whole pot because of that bet. I would almost guarantee he had our pair of threes beat for high. So because of that, I like that bet. I like that play. Again, it is somewhat player dependent, but I still like the play. Next hand, King Jack Deuce 7. No value in that hand, of course. And then the next hand we have 7 7 4 10. No value there. And then we get a high only hand, which is an ace 10 King 9 double suited. I like these kind of hands. When I played a lot of Omaha cash games, when I used to play those live for a living, I used to really play a lot of high hands. I've kind of touched on it a little bit in my previous videos. High hands are tough to play. You have to have experience to know how to play them. If you're new or kind of a novice to Omaha high-low, I would shy away from high hands unless they're really strong high hands, because you do have to have a little bit more polish to your game to know when they're beat, because they can be tough to play correctly. But nonetheless, as for me, I do enjoy playing them quite a bit, and so I call this hand, of course, and we see a 5-way flop. And I flop top 2 with a gut shot, but of course Jack 10 beats me, and there's hearts out there. So this is kind of a tricky hand. And actually I don't like my position at all now, because the first 2 players bet. I have to call, and everyone behind me, I have bad position basically. Everyone behind me gets to act again. So I opt to just call, which I mean, we have top two, right? We have top two and a gut shot. It's not like this hand is foldable here, but we definitely want to proceed with caution. And it just gets called. Now, of course, the worst card on the deck is a 10 for us. Now we're basically drawing to the full house. But the interesting thing is they all check, which is kind of weird. I would anticipate or expect somebody with the jack here, the jack and a piece, somebody with a straight, I would expect them to bet that. And so because of that, I actually don't mind a bet here by us, but it's possible we're up against a set, pocket queens or something. I'm not really sure where they're at. I have to take the free card so I don't get check raised or something, but I think because they both checked, as a general rule of thumb, I should expect that we have the best hand the majority of the time. In fact, if they both check again, I think we can safely bet. And they do both check, and I do bet. And I anticipate I'll probably get paid by 2 pair or something if they have it. We get a call and a fold, and we show aces and kings, and he has aces and queens. So we do get called by a worse 2 pair, and I'd say well played and good read. And when I say good read, what I mean is good read for the value bet on 7th Street, because we got a little extra value out of that by betting 2 pair onto that kind of board in Omaha high-low. Of course, the next hand here is no value. And then 6, 8, 9 jack double suited. Again, no value in this hand or game. Same thing here. Some of those hands look pretty, but they won't look pretty to your pocketbook. Here we have the big blind. So far, no razors, and we'll see a free flop. Obviously, we flop a pair of aces, but there's low cards out there, and we have no kicker. And we have an 8-4 low draw. So this hand basically has no value. If it was like heads up blind versus blind or something, I would play this hand, but as played, I like a fold. So we do. And here we have ace, deuce, deuce, queen. The good thing about having ace, deuce, deuce is that it's much harder for our opponents to have an ace, deuce when we have 2 of the deuces. And then, of course, we have the suited ace and ace with a good kicker to go with it. So it gets raised from the uber aggressive player again. So we just opt to 3-bet it. Try and get it heads up, which is what we do. We flop, obviously, the gut shot to the Broadway with a couple overcards, and a backup. We have a backup flush draw if we catch running clubs, and we have backup nut low draw. So I'll just go ahead and continue the aggression and bet. He does call us. Now, of course, we turn the flush draw. So we have a gut shot to, now there's no low that can come, of course, but we have nut flush draw and a gut shot to the nut straight, which would be the queen would come in. I'm sorry, the king would come in and make our ace queen the nut straight. So I'm going to go ahead and bet again. It's kind of a semi bluff, although with that board, I should anticipate I might be getting raised a fair portion when he does have that. But an 8 is a pretty dirty card to be holding if you're playing Omaha high-low. It's going to be in your hand sort of by chance, because you're not playing a hand because it has an 8 in it, right? You're only playing a hand because of something else that happens to have an 8. And so because of that, I think it's a little bit safer, but still should have proceeded with a bit of caution there. But I do like this semi-bluff play a lot. And I use it quite a bit, especially in Omaha. I think those semi-bluff hands pay off possibly the most in Omaha than they do in any other game, because you do have sort of that half equity, type hand, and you can take the other opponent's other half of the equity by pressuring them in that hand when they think they may be beaten, especially if they're kind of just weak on whatever their draw is. So the next hand we have here, deuce 3, 6, and of course this is Raz. This is the first hand of Raz on the next round. And we have we're in early position. If we look behind us, there's an ace, ace, 4, 7, all cards that we like and would want to see. And our worst card is in the door, but that's okay. This is still a pretty strong hand, and so we'll raise it from under the gun. And it looks like everybody's going to fold, and we'll just take the pot, which is generally a good result. And then the next hand we get here certainly has some steal potential. Now I don't know. We get again, we get the aggressive player raising from under the gun. And I would anticipate that our hand is probably even with his range right now because of how loose and aggressive he is. But it doesn't matter. We can't really call a raise with this, but we can certainly raise with it if it gets folded to us. So here we have the ace deuce 6, and we just had a dead 5, a dead 4, and a dead 3 that are out there. Of course, those are each one of the cards that we would really like to see, but again, we have a very strong hand. And the aggressive player raises, and we just get a caller from Polish Strawberry. This is a re-raise hand, especially because of what we know about Omnics. I don't know that I did that in this tournament, if I was really that advanced at this stage yet. I guess I was. I did make the right raise. So kudos to me back then, I guess, for making the re-raise. I pick up the deuce, which is perfect because that's a really low card. He catches a pair and he catches a king. I anticipate that Omnics doesn't have a 3-card low. I certainly think it's in his range. He could have a 3-card low, but his range is very wide here because of how often he steals. And so I'll just bet into him, and he just folds flat out, of course, because he had a brick. And the other player folds, and even though that was our pair card for us, of course we're going to continue with the bet because our board looks good. And perfect result for us. We get double bets from them both on 3rd Street, and we get the steal on 4th Street. I call it steal, but we probably have the best hand. And so here we have, of course, the ace. Definitely a steal hand if it gets folded to us, but it won't, so we'll fold. And another steal hand if it gets folded to us, but it doesn't. The 8 raises, and I fold. And I believe I played a pretty tight Raz game early on in my horse career, so to speak. And the next one is queen 3 queen. Obviously not going to defend that. And now we're switching to 7-card stud high. So this is the first hand of stud high in this rotation. And this is kind of fun for me. This is actually the first time I'm going back through this tournament after I'd played it. So this is a lot of fun, getting to see how I used to play. I like criticizing myself. It's a lot of fun. And stud high, remember, this is not Raz, so this is a strong hand. Ace, king, queen, of course, worth a raise. And just everyone else folds. 10, jack, 7, not strong enough to raise here, of course, a fold. And then we pick up the king, 6, 5, and we do have the highest door card if it gets folded to us, but it doesn't, so we'll just safely fold. And then we catch the bring in. It gets completed, and we're not going to defend with anything here with the 9-3 deuce. And then, of course, we get aces. We've got a jack in the hole. We've got a couple kings and a queen out there. So we're really hoping that one of them pairs, and we'll get some action. The queen folds, the king folds, and opt to raise. And Rocky Boy doesn't have anything, and but we will get called by the big blind. So I'll bet into him here, and he raises. This is kind of interesting. The question is he raising with a flush draw here, or what some players will do here is they'll defend their pair of 2s, and then they'll try and raise you on 4th Street to see if you actually have the ace. Because remember, we are in absolute steal position. Everyone folded to us. We're not supposed to have a pair of aces here. He could just be playing aggressively, and because of that, I think 3-betting is okay. If you know that he's the guy who's got a flush, or a flush draw there on 4th Street, then you don't really want to be just jamming it with him. But if you do think that his range includes other hands like pair of 2s or just any kind of pair, then go ahead and raise again. But as played, at this point the hand kind of plays itself now when he catches that next club. So I just have to go into check call mode, which I don't do. I bet into him. Which is just bad poker. So when I say it plays itself, apparently I was unaware of that at the time. So he raises me and I just call. At this point I learned my lesson and check into him and just call. And at this point, I fell up on the river, and he probably has the flush. I bet into him. I'm not sure if I'm afraid he was going to let it check behind or something, or if I'm hoping he raises and I can 3-bet. Um, he does raise, and of course I can 3-bet, and he folds. So that's kind of interesting. I don't really know what he has there. I think he was just thinking I was on the steal and kept trying to represent it, represent something he didn't have, and that was a pretty expensive try and re-steal by him when I make jacks full. I don't think he folded a flush there with 800 chips left on however many thousand chip pot that was. So he probably had nothing. So here we have somewhat steal position. I don't really like stealing though with a couple of big cards behind us. So I don't. I fold. The 8-7 deuce, not really worth defending or talking about. But nobody raises, so we'll go ahead and take that pot. Here we have an ace king unsuited. 6 is a hanger for us. We don't want to play with hangers. A hanger, of course, if you're not quite familiar with some of the terminology, but a hanger is a card that accompanies your other cards that does nothing for you, and that's what that 6 of diamonds is. It's called a hanger, so I fold that. And here we have a king in the door, which is the highest door card if the ace folds, but it doesn't, so I like a fold. And then now we're moving on to stud high low split. So this is a strong stud high low hand. We pick up ace 7-5. The ace is buried though, so we don't have the steal potential that we do if the ace were in the door. And because of that, I like a limp, and which is what I do. One of the other things too to pay particular attention to is that a lot of our straight cards, a lot of the cards we actually want are out. The 8 and the 6, there's 2 8s and a 6 gone, which are both straight cards for us. The 4 is a straight card for us, and the ace and the 5 are both pair cards for us. So every single one of these dead cards affects our hand in one way or another. That doesn't mean it's worth folding. We still have a strong hand, but it's worth proceeding with caution, which is why I limp. And so Alimochi raises with his ace in the door, perfectly understandable if he wants to play it. Might as well represent something. And so we pair our door card on 4th Street, which has got to be somewhat scary for him. But if he was paying attention, this player, Miss Herpes, here on the left, also another solid player, actually folded a 5, I believe. And so if he was paying attention, then he'll notice that that it's not too likely we have trip 5s. But he does pick up a low card, which is an 8. So again, I kind of like proceeding with caution here. I check to him, and he checks back, which is perfect for us. 5th Street comes, we pick up a jack. At this point, I bet into him because I anticipate that he probably doesn't have a pair of aces, because I think he probably would have bet a pair of aces there on 4th Street. So I'm not entirely sure where he's at. I want to put a little bit of pressure on him. I have a lot of chips at this point. I think I was pretty big chip lead in this tournament. I was just catching hand after hand. And I just recognized Aaron Bartley is also at the table, who is one of the red full tilt pros. Who, I won't get into it too much, but I don't really like him very much. Yeah, I played with him in person several times. And he's not. I don't think he's a very solid player, and he's not a very nice person. So I'll probably be picking on him in the video a bit. You may see some of that. But that works out great. I take the pot there on 5th Street. So we have buried queens, of course. And there, I guess we're talking to each other. Hey, Aaron. I think he knew who I was at the time. Nonetheless, he brings it in, and we love our hand. We have buried queens, and this is almost a must raise for the jack here to our right. He doesn't, so we raise, and unfortunately, we don't get any action with our hidden hand. But so we pick up 7-8 deuce as the bring in. There's some dead cards out there that affect us. We get a limper. Of course, we pick up a good card on 4th Street, and we'll just bet it for value and take the pot. And I could have stolen with this. I actually don't mind a steal there, especially against Aaron. But I may part of the reason I didn't, possibly because Aaron may have played back at me. He is a pretty aggressive player. Well, he can be. I shouldn't say he is. He's not a poor player. I shouldn't say that. He knows how to mix up, change gears a bit. He has a fairly solid limit hold'em game. I will say that. So here we have a 3 to a flush, but I like this hand against another high hand, particularly because we have the ace and the king. We have the low, backup low potential, but of course we have the 3 to a flush potential. So I call, and gin card for us on 4th Street. Of course, we catch our diamond draw, and I just call here, even though I'm ahead on when I'm playing just against another high hand. I'm ahead here, but I mean the truth is I think all these chips are probably going in no matter what. He's only got 385 behind after this, so I think I opt to just raise him, get it all in here. And now he has a flush draw as well. He has the better flush draw. Notice we have ace king 9. He has ace king jack. So a really strong hand for him, and actually probably the worst thing that we want to see him have. That's really not good for us. But we make a pair of queens. He makes a pair of kings, and he'll take the pot. So nice hand by Brushman 17, who I think was actually a pretty strong player if I remember correctly from this tournament. If I recall, I think he may have gone far. I'm not sure. I'll keep an eye out for him. So here we are, still in stud high-low. I, of course, have 3 to a flush, but there's the dead ace of spades out there, which is kind of hindering my progress with this hand. So I would like to see... I kind of like a fold here. I understand why I played it, but I don't really think it's that mandatory in a stud high-low environment, especially with the ace of spades behind you and 3 low cards, or 4 low cards to act. Still, I think I can safely appreciate a fold there. But it works out. We steal the pot. Nobody wants to play. Nobody had anything apparently. And it did have some steal value, of course, obviously, so shouldn't demote it too much. But here we have kind of the same thing. A couple dead diamonds out there, a couple dead jacks. We have the highest board card. It gets limped and raised, and at this point, I fold it, and I like that. I think that's well played. Especially in comparison with the last one, where the last one had some steal potential. So at least I was at this point in my career aware of the borderline difference between the two. One being that this type of hand doesn't play well when you're the caller, but it does play a little bit better when you're the raiser. But I still would like a fold on both of them. And so here we have split threes with another low card, the 8. Makes it a little bit more playable. If it gets folded to us, it's an easy raise. It gets raised behind us, and it's kind of a close hand. Like if this guy has a pair of 7s, we're behind him and don't really want to play. If this guy has 3 to a low, like 3 to a 7, then we don't really like our pair of 3s against his range. And even if we make a backup low, like it's an 8. So we're kind of drawing uphill against this guy, probably either way. So I like the fold there. And so that's it for stud high-low. So we move back again here to the next hold'em round, and I'm going to go ahead and proceed with this video since we just concluded the full rotations of those games. I'll go ahead and start the next video with on this hand, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. This is again Rainman Trail for PokerStrategy.com, signing out.